Hey, everybody. Welcome. I am so glad that you're here. I want to tell you a little bit of background about me. I've been a group fitness instructor since 1980. I wrote a couple of books. I produce a weekly TV show with my husband, Ted Nugent. But my story and my journey have really brought me to this point and to this place for one reason. I got sick and almost died from toxic mold between the walls of my home that was once featured on MTV Cribs. And, for the past several years, God has nudged me to share my story, to help bring awareness to this devastating issue and really to help others. So currently I'm writing a very detailed book about toxic mold illness, and I'm also producing a documentary. I have a free mold checklist on my website, which is ShemaneNugent.rocks/mold. And the more research I do on mold, the more incredible information I find. My guest today has a lot of information to share with you. So please write your comments write your questions and comments in the comment section. He is the co-founder of We Inspect and the host of Mold Finders Radio podcast. Brian Karr, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. This is super cool. I'm excited to do this.
Yeah, technology is awesome, right?
I know.
So Brian,
sitting staring at my phone. Like, this is how we're doing. It's amazing.
Well, I found you because like I said, I've been doing a lot more investigative journalism, so to speak, about mold. I thought I knew everything, but when I finally acquiesced to God and said, okay, I'm going to write this book. Okay, I'm going to produce this documentary. I want to find out everything there is to know about mold illness, remediation. And Brian, the more that I researched, the more I discovered people like you. And if you would share your story about how you got involved in becoming a mold finder.
Yeah, it's not something you go to school for, to be a person that finds mold in houses. Like, that's not what you do. And so it didn't start honestly, it started for me the same way it did for a lot of my clients that I work with. I work with people that were kind of in your situation. Like I was telling you before, I saw your story. I knew of your story a long time ago before we even got connected. And so you're obviously not the only person that goes through this, but you've been, you have a platform, and it's amazing that you're sharing, and trying to bring awareness to this. And, so that was I was the same as just everybody else, and one day I'm in my apartment, I'm literally looking for a job because I was feeling very unfulfilled with what I was doing. I was in advertising, and it was just I didn't feel like I was making a difference in the world. And so I was literally on my bed looking for a job on monster.com. And I'm like, job that makes me feel fulfilled, and nothing comes up, obviously. And all of a sudden I feel something on my arm, and I look down, and there's a water drip mark on my arm. And then I look up at the ceiling, and I could see it happening. It was the staining was actually growing as I looked. I was like, oh my God, this ceiling's gonna collapse on me. This is insane. I get out of my bed right in time. Water starts coming through the light outlet in my ceiling. And it turns out that there was a pipe leak up above me. I was in an apartment from the bathroom that was above my apartment. And the story that happened with me is a story that happens with so many people, right? The landlord didn't really think it was a problem. They bring out a plumber, fix the leak, cover it up, don't really do anything about mold. Next thing you know, I start feeling I'm not my mental kind of sharpness is going away a little bit. I start noticing skin rashes on my face, over the course of a few weeks. And I end up, kind of pushing towards having a mold inspection done. But at the time I didn't know anything. And so the inspector came in, and they do what most inspectors do. They came in, they took a couple air samples in my room and said everything was okay. Cause that's what happens when you take air samples in the middle of the room. So they usually come back with a false negative. Luckily, my father-in-law now, but at the time, my girlfriend, who's now my wife, her dad, his name is Mark Levy. He was one of the top experts in the country, and he's really where I learned everything. And this is really a family business. And he basically came in, looked through my place after all this, kind of the health symptoms started. And he's like, Brian, there's at least 8 problems where I'm finding there's mold hidden in this house. He tests all of it for me, validates all of it for me. So we prove that it's all there. He ends up getting me out of my lease, calls the landlord on my behalf, and basically kind of threatens a lawsuit. And next thing you know, I'm out of my lease, and I'm out of the sick home. And I see what happened. And I'm like, I gotta work for you. You gotta teach me this. This is what I've been looking for. This is why I've been typing in my bed, like job that fulfills me. This is it. Like, let me work with you. And that started the process. I trained with Mark for a long time and became myself one of the go-tos for doctors across the country. And that's how it started.
So quick question, when you Googled or when you searched online for jobs that bring me fulfillment, did anything else come up?
No, it's so funny. It's like jobs are all about how much do you want to make? What field do you want to be in? It's not about what's going to make me feel like I'm making an impact in the world. It was very, I was struggling, let's just say, to find
Well,
that.
and you said you heard about me and saw my story and everything. It's not like I wanted to be the mold lady or the bold mold lady or whatever you say about it. But I think, God has a way of pushing us into finding our purpose in life. I believe our goal here is to share our knowledge with other people and to help others. And so talk about bringing fulfillment. I'm seeing all these questions coming in. For those of you watching on the replay, we are streaming live right now on my Facebook page, also on Twitter or Periscope and YouTube. And I'm going to post this comment. Can you see this?
I can see it. Yeah.
Okay. Tell me why that's wrong from another Brian. Tell Brian why that's wrong.
It will make you sick. My bathroom, spray bleach water in a spray bottle. I'm guessing he's saying that if I just spray something with bleach, it's going to go away. Or is that kind of what the deal is? Right. All right. So here's the big concept. I won't even get into bleach specifically, but the big concept is, first off, most mold is hidden. So most mold you can't see. It's behind walls, it's hidden places. Yeah. Even if bleach worked, which it doesn't, even if it did, you're only wiping a surface. You're not actually getting what's below. So I use this analogy all the time that mold is like an iceberg. It wasn't the tip of the iceberg that sunk the Titanic. It was everything that was hidden down below that they hit and the Titanic falls down, right? Same thing in the house. What you see is just the tip of what's going on. And here's the secret, guys, and this is like the big thing. To look for mold in your house, the secret to finding mold is not actually looking for mold. The secret to finding mold is looking for water damage and understanding the history of the house and where there's been water issues and knowing that behind those walls, behind the ceilings, in the cabinets, the places you can't see, that's typically where the mold is growing. And so again, even if bleach was a magical thing that works, which it's not, even if that happened, you clean the surface and there's still everything left down below and it's still going to impact your space.
Okay, so Brian's got a follow-up question. Thanks. Just around the toilet and shower, is that okay?
I mean, again, it's about the understanding of how mold grows, right? So if there's an issue around your toilet or your shower, there's the possibility that your toilet is leaking, that your shower is leaking. It's getting under the floors, it's getting into the walls back there. So again, just wiping the surface may not be addressing the full issue behind. It's really important to be doing moisture mapping, to be doing infrared camera readings, to be doing source testing to figure out if there are hidden problems back there, and then creating a holistic plan that actually will remove the problem. It's all about source removal. That's what it is.
So let's talk about this. I'm sure you've heard this question before. I think I've got mold in my house. What do I do? Yeah. What's your action plan?
So there's something you could do really easy on your own just to get a sense of the load of what's happening in a house. It's called an ERMI test. It's ERMI. It stands for Environmental Relative Moldiness Index. What this was, the EPA I forget the year now, it's about 15 years ago or so now. They did this study across the country. It was 1,100 homes all across the country. And they were trying to basically create like a scoring system standard where you can compare your house to an index and figure out if your house is more moldy or less moldy than their study across the country. That was the goal of what this thing was. And there are some flaws in how you read the report and different things like that. So you have to know how to read them. But the awesome thing about the technology behind that is that it's using DNA formatting of any of the mold types that are present. And the way that you do it is you collect dust throughout your house. So the awesome thing to collect dust in your house is literally you're taking a Swiffer pad and wiping over stuff. And that's how you collect dust in the house. And it can give you an understanding of what is moving out of the walls, what's coming out of the ventilation system and settling down onto the surfaces in your house. And that gives you an idea of just the overall mold load, the types of molds that are there. And you can get a feeling for what's happening at that point. And that's a really good first step that people can do, kind of like a self-test on their own, just to confirm their suspicions of, am I being exposed to mold in this house? It's not going to tell you where it's coming from. It's not going to tell you how to fix it, but it'll let you understand if there's something going on there.
Joseph says, we have mold at my job. They gave us a deodorant for mold. I never heard of that. Have
Like a
you?
personal deodorant, or like they spray the office. Like,
it's amazing some of the things that people come up with. What are some of the other ways of testing? I know there's a lot of different types of testing. We did some really, really detailed testing, and every time I move or get a new home or whatever it is, I have to take all the steps, and then I have to test. I want to test about every year, every other year.
yeah, and I know a lot of people that do that too. They think about it like they would do maintenance on their car, right? It's so funny. Your car is 20, 30, $50,000, whatever your car is, right? Your house is like hundreds of thousands, if not more. You never do maintenance on your house because no one ever taught us to do that.
Yeah.
But you're like my dad, when I got my car, he's like, you better take this in every 3,000 miles or your engine's going to explode. Like, this is what he told me about getting my oil changed. And so I learned, get my car serviced, right? It's just something you learn. You never learn that with your house. And it's important. So like that testing piece you're talking about makes sense as like an ongoing maintenance thing. In terms of testing, it's to take a step back and understand like what we're testing for and the goal of that, and how you basically combine different samples to accentuate their strengths, but then to fill in their weaknesses. So you create a sampling plan that gives you a full picture of what's going on in the home. And the without getting super into it, the summary that I give my clients is, listen, when I walk into a house, I have 2 goals. First goal is to figure out, are there any hidden sources of mold anywhere that we can't see? I use this analogy that these are the factories that are creating the problem that might be happening in your house. So imagine that you drive by a factory just outside somewhere. The factory is making whatever it's making inside, and smoke is coming out of the top of the factory, right? Oh, my hand's backwards. Smoke is coming out of the top of the factory. It's not the factory that is making us sick. That's not the air pollution that we're breathing. It's the smoke that's coming out of the factory, right? Well, the same thing happens in your house. The problem is, if mold is your factory, then if you never get rid of the factory, if you never shut the factory down, if you never fire all the workers that are in the factory, then the smoke is going to continue to come out of that factory and you continue to be exposed. So step 1 is to find where the factories are located and validate them. Exactly, and validate them through source testing. We call this source testing. The purpose is to validate where the hidden mold is located. The next type of testing is what we call dispersion or cross-contamination testing. And that's really, in our analogy, to figure out what the smoke is that's moving through your house and how it's maybe impacted your air conditioning system or how it's settled in the living spaces of your house. So you can create a holistic remediation plan that covers your whole house. And it's not only focused on one thing. The biggest reason remediation fails, people will say all the time, remediation doesn't work. I spent all this money and it doesn't work.
Because they don't do it right.
It's because they're not doing it right. We're not understanding that your home is a living system. And we're only focusing on like this wall that has a problem. But we don't think about how the smoke coming out of the factory back here is moving through the house and how we're breathing that. So you have to address the source. You then have to do testing of the heating, air conditioning systems, and you have to test the living spaces of the house to get a full look. And then we can put a complete remediation plan together for that.
What happened to us when I first got exposed, it was around the year 2001. And of course, back then, nobody was talking about mold. In fact, if you said, I think we have mold in our house, they would have said white bleach on it and call it a day. You'll be fine. All of your symptoms are in your head. And we had our house tested twice, and it came out negative. So we weren't dealing with people. Of course, we lived in a rural area and people didn't know what they were doing, how to treat it, how to remediate it properly. And at one point, we had gotten so sick that we had to live in a fifth wheel, a camper, basically on our driveway, because my husband had agreed to do this reality show for VH1 called Surviving.Nugent. Like, we had to be at the house, and we didn't want to live there. We were so sick. I had debilitating migraines. We had chronic fatigue, absolute complete insomnia. My son was on breathing treatments. And we realized that just being out of the house, whenever we traveled, we felt better. We'd go back into the house and we started feeling sick again. So I had to become my own investigative sleuth. And that's what I've always encouraged other people to do, is you've got to start becoming your own advocate. And I'm seeing all these amazing questions coming in. Clint King says, how do we access the test in Idaho, or any test? That's a good question. How do you find the proper remediator no matter where you are, Brian?
Well, so there's two things on the testing front. So inspection and testing and remediation are two different things. And so a lot of times people think of it as the same thing, but remediators are the people that come in and clean up the problem. Their job isn't to find the problem, and that's not their expertise. And so they're not very good at finding the problem. That's not what they do. Whereas like what we do is we specialize in finding where the problems are and creating the plan that then the remediation companies follow. And so it's important to kind of have both pieces. To answer that first, his question specifically, that ERMI test, anyone can do. The lab that we use, it's called EnviroBiomics. It's EnviroBiomics, EnviroBiomics. You could go to their site, you can order an ERMI test. They send you a Swiffer cloth that's like a sanitized Swiffer cloth. You collect dust from throughout your house, you send it back into them, and they send you the results. So that's an easy way to do that initial screening test.
If somebody can write in the comment section, what's the name of that website again, Brian? Somebody can write.
Yeah. Do you need me to try to write it?
If you can, go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead. And then somebody asked a while ago, so many comments are coming in. I appreciate you guys, but I lost this one where it came from. I think a girl named Candy. Candy asked, what are the symptoms? Now, I know my symptoms. I know. Go ahead and describe some of the symptoms that are potential, Brian.
Got it. Okay. I haven't figured this comment thing out.
Okay. But I'll do it. Okay. Tell me what it is and I'll type it in.
I could send you afterwards. I could send you the link to that too.
Oh, Clint typed it. Envirobiotics? No?
No, it's biomics. So change the 2 to an M and you got it.
That one. Biomics. Okay.
Okay. Symptoms. Symptoms can be so many things. So, you were talking early 2000s. This is actually when a lot of the research was first starting to come out. Dr. Richie Shoemaker was really the pioneer that was starting to understand how the environment impacts us. And the thing about it is a multi-symptom, multi-system problem, meaning the symptoms can be a wide range of symptoms and it can affect multiple systems within your body. So it's not just one symptom. So you could have your basic symptoms from people that aren't maybe genetically susceptible or have another health condition that's kind of making them more susceptible. You can have your more basic, kind of upper respiratory stuff. But then as you start getting into people who are genetically just not predisposed to detox properly, you start seeing them manifest in different ways. It's gut problems, it's brain fog, it's neuroinflammation, it's memory loss, cognitive decline, skin issues. So one of my big triggers is skin issues. All of these things are caused by chronic inflammation in your body. So inflammation in your body can trigger different systems to react in a different way. So I wish that there was one reference I would give you to kind of help you feel that out. There's a book that was written by Dr. Jill Krista. It's called Break the Mold. And she has a section in the book that talks about all the different systems in the body and how the symptoms look in those systems. And she breaks everyone down. It's an awesome book to look at to help you with that.
Yeah, there's so many amazing books out there. And my friend Doug Kaufman, he's got a lot of books. He's got a daily or twice weekly YouTube show called Know the Cause. So if you're getting symptoms, if you have basically multiple symptoms or multiple chemical sensitivity, which is what I developed, that's a good indication to see that there is inflammation in your body. There is something wrong. And, when I was going to dozens and dozens of different doctors, I had just absolutely debilitating migraines. I went to the #1 world migraine specialist. And literally, Brian, he was, just pretend this is my computer. He walked into the room. I could barely even walk myself into the room. He walked into the room and he's looking at his computer and he's typing, what's your name? What are your symptoms? Okay, take this one. And if that doesn't work, take #2. If that doesn't work, take #3. If that doesn't work, take #4. Have a good day. And he walked out. Like he didn't even hear me. He didn't even, and what medication is doing now, I am not anti-medication, but this is like, because when you have a migraine, a debilitating migraine, you have to I got to the point where I had to have an abortive or I couldn't function for weeks. That's no way to live until you determine, until you get to the cause. But what happens is, the medication covers the problem. It's like when you just talked about finding the water source, finding the source of that that industry that is polluting your air. You've got to find the problem, and then you can deal with finding the cure.
Yeah, and that's actually the big fundamental difference between functional and integrated medicine as compared to like your normal kind of Western medicine is normal, the doctors that typically your insurance will cover and those sorts of things. Those are the guys that are doing or the guys or gals that are doing exactly what you said, right? The functional medicine community is all about understanding root cause of what's causing the migraine, right? And trying to get to that and fix it from the root versus covering up with medications, because it's not going to solve the problem.
Right. So you talked about insurance. Now that's a lot of doctors have to work with insurance companies, but the problem is when they dole out something like, they're not going to make any money from if they recommend go outside and breathe fresh air and exercise and drink a lot of water and eat right and eliminate triggers and do natural things that can help you feel better and eliminate the inflammation in your body. So what can people do to get better insurance and better help through their insurance companies?
Honestly, I wish I knew the answer to that. I don't know. I don't want to claim that I do know the answer to that. I think there are some things out there now. There are some doctors that are creating platforms for people that are much more affordable that give guidance. So two that come to mind, Dr. Jill Christ, I mentioned again, she has a membership community where people could join. It's a monthly fee. There's Q&As with her. There's a lot of resources where she can kind of help guide folks in that way. Also, Dr. Jess Petros, who's another amazing kind of stealth infection mold focused doctor. She has a program as well called Wellness Plus by Dr. Jess, and she has a lot of information there too. And it's so much more affordable. It's like $50 a month or 100, whatever it is, to get in there and get access to the things that you're talking about. Here's how you detoxify. Here's how you do an enema. Here's how you do certain things. Here are things that you can do to help support your system and open up your pathways that will even prepare you to detox. And then once your pathways are open, here's the things that you can do to detox. And there's a lot of that information that's becoming aware. Those are two platforms that I know specifically that are easily accessible, not super expensive, getting access to literally two of the best minds in mold treatment to get some guidance. And they both do Q&As and they have resources. They're awesome. So like either one of those places would be good starts.
Yeah, I listened to your podcast with, is it Dr. Jess?
Yeah.
She was great. Love it.
She's amazing. Yeah, she's a wealth of knowledge.
Spunky and fun. Now, I want to ask you something. I want to get a little bit more at the root cause, so to speak. And you mentioned people who could be predisposed to having mold problems genetically. Why do you think that is?
I don't know the reason. I mean, I don't know from that perspective. I'm sure there's been genetic mutations over time and it's kind of created this. There's really three things that I see that cause people to be more sensitive. The first one is actually their genetic makeup. So there are different genes in your body. They get turned on and turned off. And if you have one of these genes that are not flipped in the right direction, it doesn't allow your body to detox environmental contaminants properly. There's about 25% of the population that's just dealt this genetic card and it sucks, right? And that's your card. And so it's not because you did anything wrong or you weren't taking care of yourself. It's literally just your genetics. And so that 25% of people, it's just going to be difficult for them. The second thing is previous exposures. So even if you didn't have that genetic makeup, if you were exposed to mold as a kid, as a young person, and one thing I've learned through all my conversations with a lot of the medical experts that I'm friendly with is that your immune system is not actually fully developed till you're near 20 years old. So if you're exposed to mold issues before your immune system gets fully developed, then that can actually rewrite your DNA and make you more susceptible to those things when maybe you weren't initially. And so a previous exposure can be another big reason. So let's say you were a kid and grew up in a basement in your house that had problems. Well, you're going to be more susceptible most likely because you had an exposure problem. And then the third one is whatever your current health position is now. Let's say you have Lyme disease, you have an autoimmune disorder, something like that. Your immune system is going to be depleted because you're dealing with that other stuff, and you're going to be more susceptible. So those are the three big things that I've seen that allow someone to kind of be more symptomatic and more problematic than someone who you quote call like normal. But the funny thing is when you look at all of those things together, and I did this in a presentation I did last year. If you just take people that have the genetic thing that I talked about, and then just look at people with Lyme disease, autoimmune disease, and PANS and PANDAS, which is a pediatric neurological issue, that's 40% of the entire US population that is susceptible to mold. That is not like a weird thing. It's not like we're the crazy person that's a problem. It's most people. And that's a big thing.
I had to search for it while you were talking, because I know the name of that gene only by the word. Do you know that? Do you know that?
Oh, the MTHFR.
Yeah. So yeah. That's another way to remember the name. It's MTFHR gene, right?
Yeah.
So there's a word that you can use to remember that.
It's true. Every time I see it, that's what I think. And everybody, the people that have the issue, they refer to that. They're like, that M gene is messing things up. It's funny.
Right. Okay. So let me ask you about this. And one of the things that nobody else is really talking about with people who suffer more, like you could have two people in the same house, one person gets sicker than the other. Yes, it's pre-exposure and also genetic predisposure. What about this, Brian? What about stress?
Well, stress is a big component. You know, there's so many things that go. I mean, think about if you're pregnant and you're stressed, it causes problems with your pregnancy. Like stress is a very big issue just in general in your body. It's raising it's raising certain cortisol levels and different things. It's not allowing your body to regenerate and heal the way that it's supposed to. And so that's a problem. You know, it's really looking at the holistic view of everything that's going on, right? So you have whatever your environmental piece is, but then you have to handle yourself. You have to handle your detoxing. You have to handle your stress component. You have to kind of get all of that stuff working together to allow your body. Honestly, our bodies are incredible if we get out of our own way and let them do what they were built to do.
Yeah.
We just have to remove the obstacles that we're placing in front of it, so then it can heal, because it's meant to, and it's miraculous the things that it can do once you start removing those hurdles from it.
And we have to give ourselves some time. Like when Ted and I first got married, he was touring 150 days, 250 days a year. And that's stressful, just tagging along. That means a different city for 200 days a year, a different hotel, different exposures. When I went to the Environmental Health Center in Dallas and got extensive tests, found out that I had fireproofing in my hair because of sleeping in so many hotels, which are required by law to have so many chemicals and toxins in their bedding and fireproofing. So it's interesting. The more that I research all this, the more that it's intriguing to me, because I feel like I'm always doing this, Brian. Like I'm just trying to keep my head above water, and I'll have good days or weeks or months or even years. And then I'll walk into a house, walk into a building that has severe chemicals that hits me like a brick wall. And it takes me, it sets me back, or stress or lack of sleep can hit me hard too.
Well, sleep is your restorative state, right? So again, we're trying to get our body to heal itself and to do what it's supposed to do. And a lot of your neurological detoxification happens during sleep time. So if you're not sleeping properly, or like what you're saying, you're being exposed to fire retardants while you're sleeping and the off-gassing of your bed, your body's not going to be able to do what it needs to do because of that. And what's really interesting, if we just talk about the brain for a second, mycotoxins, which are mold toxins. When you hear the phrase toxic mold, people are actually referring to what's called a mycotoxin. It's literally a chemical that molds create that's meant to kill living things. It's part of its defense mechanism to protect itself from other molds that are coming into its territory. So it's this chemical it makes to kill them. Well, we're living things too, right? Now, it's not going to kill us like that, but it could have a pretty big impact. The thing about mycotoxins is that they're fat soluble, meaning that they store in the fat cells in our body. Our brain is like 60% fat. And then you start thinking about, well, how do I expose to mold? My breathing pathway. So your most direct pathway to what you're being exposed to is through your nasal cavity while you're breathing. Your nasal is right next to your brain. There have been research studies that have now put out that people that were showing signs of Alzheimer's disease and they thought that they had Alzheimer's, they didn't actually have Alzheimer's. They took them out of a moldy environment and put them on antifungals, and all of a sudden the symptoms went away because it was inflaming their brain because of the direct connect there. So For women, you were talking about like how, somebody can be more susceptible in a house than others. Women physiologically have more fat just from the way that they're built than men do. So they have more fat store, which is more places for mycotoxins to harbor and other contaminants to harbor, in addition to our brains generally being a big store. So that's one reason that maybe like women might show, like I see that women typically show more than men do in the houses I go into. And I think that's part of it. But then we start talking about the cognitive issue, and our brains are just a place to harbor all of this stuff, right? And yeah.
So Linda is saying, I always feel drunk from molds in my home. And I wanted to also comment on something that when I was researching, I've also discovered that the testosterone in men help protect them a little bit more than in women. So you guys get a free pass on that one, just like you did with not having childbirth. But so tell us about like brain fog. And Linda was saying she feels drunk from mold.
Many of my clients, I want to say most, I don't know exactly. Many of my clients, there's some sort of cognitive issue. A lot of times it's described as brain fog. It's like I'm kind of like walking around and things seem foggy. I'm not able to focus properly. Other people, it turns more into like my brain feels like it's on fire. I had a client who their daughter went and my client was a doctor, right? And so that's how they found us. And his daughter was having inflammatory brain issues, and they went and they got brain scans, which are called a neuroquant, which is like a very special brain scan you can do to kind of check inflammation in your brain. And the technician, like the person that was doing the reading on the scan, said that it looked like that there were volcanoes going off in his daughter's brain because of all the inflammation. We go into the house, in the attic right above her bedroom, covered in mold. She was sleeping right under this massive source of a mold problem, and it was causing brain inflammation. She was getting like physical, like pain, like brain pain. So when you start talking migraines and the more physical pain, that's kind of more on that front. Sometimes other people are more of like the foggy sort of feeling, right? Like when she described like that drunk sort of feeling.
Yeah.
Also, memory loss is very big. I can't tell you how many times I work with clients and I have to repeat myself multiple times just because they don't remember what I told them. And so that's a big thing. Yeah.
One time, Ted, when we had the portable telephones, house phones, Ted put the phone in the refrigerator and I put a carton of milk in a cupboard. Like it was just constantly like short-term memory loss, chronic fatigue. We just always felt like I was teaching group fitness classes, like 10 a week. And at one point it got to the point where it felt like there was an elephant sitting on my chest. Ted rushed me to the hospital. They did all the chest x-rays and found nothing. And they sent me home in a wheelchair. And they said, sorry, like next. The problem is most emergency rooms aren't set up to do the type of testing that you need to have. So let's talk just a little bit about what type of blood tests, as Brian says, can you discover or can help you discover if you've been exposed to mold.
Yeah, I don't want to talk out of turn because I'm not a doctor. I just know a lot of them. There are different types of tests that they can do to look for different markers and things like that. Yeah. The biggest thing that I see a lot of my clients do is actually a urine test for mycotoxins in their urine. And that's a big thing. So as you're detoxing, one of your biggest excretion pathways is stool and urine, right? You're passing out of your liver and your kidney, and that's your detoxification pathways. And so stool testing and liver testing can be a way that they can get some clues that you have, fungal issues, bacterial overgrowths, mycotoxin problems that are happening, things like that. It's not a tell-all. And honestly, the same goes for a house. There's not one sample that tells you everything. There's not one clinical test that you take that tells you everything either. But if you're really working with a functional medicine doctor that understands environmental exposure, they're going to have kind of a testing plan the same way that I do when I go in a house. I describe first we look for source, then we look for how it spreads, and we look here. They're going to have the same type of flow, but typically they're looking for things that are either triggering antibodies or they are showing mycotoxin excretion or showing bacterial problems coming out of a gut stool sample or something like that that can give you a better look.
Jennifer is talking about being a personal trainer and she had to stop working. And this is a great example of how to find the right doctor. You have to go to, if you're going to get a personal trainer, not all personal trainers are the same. Not all fitness instructors are the same. And you've got to find somebody that you resonate with, somebody that will listen to you, somebody who is experienced in dealing with mold illness, and not all of them are. So unfortunately, there's no way to tell somebody who's in Idaho or Des Moines or wherever, go to this doctor or that doctor. Even some doctors that, may be experienced in mold might not be able to help you. So it's important to find somebody who resonates with you, somebody can help you get to the next step, like recommend functional medicine. I do think you need to have a general practitioner, but also a place. Doesn't even have to be a functional medicine doctor, because those of us in the sticks don't have access to that. But you do have access to one of the best things I think that saved my life is sweating.
Yes.
Now I have a infrared sauna. I work out every day, not a lot. I don't run a marathon or anything, or miles and miles and miles. I try to work out minimum 20 minutes a day, and I have an infrared heater in my workout room, so I get that sweat faster. Then I go into my sauna. Okay, so I wanted to ask you another question. I could just talk to you forever about mold. That's kind of sad.
I mean, I can, you were describing your setup. I have 3 mycotoxins in my body. I have skin reactions. I have eczema that pops up. I have things that are going on. I'm working with some of the doctors I've talked about. Dr. Jill Krista, Jess Petros have been working with me on things. And I have an infrared sauna too. I work out also. I do red light therapy.
Yep.
3 to 5 days a week. I'm in my sauna every day. Sweating is one of the biggest detoxification things. If you cannot sweat after being in an infrared sauna for about 10 minutes, then you're not draining properly. Your pathways aren't open. So the first thing you need to do is actually get on a protocol to open up your detox pathways, because there's a method that Dr. Jess Petros has. She calls kill, bind, sweat. It's one of her big things.
Yep.
And the idea is that, specific, protocols in terms of supplementation, things to kill what the problem is inside of you, binders that then grab that problem, and then the sweat is how you detox it. So the thing is, if you're not pooping every day and you're not able to sweat within 10 minutes, then you could do all the killing and binding that you want. Everybody looks at binders like, oh, we could bind and we'll get rid of it.
And describe a binder.
Yeah, so what a binder is, think of it like this. It's, you take this pill, or sometimes it's a drink or whatever it is, and think of it like a sponge that goes into your body and soaks up all the contamination in your body. It's more technical than that, but that's just kind of a basic idea of what it is. And so the idea is that if you're killing and you're kind of working to, detox from mold, or pull out, parasites or whatever it might be that you're going on, the binders go down and grab them after that, right? And kind of soaks it up. And then you detox it out through sweat and through poop, are two of the biggest ways that you do it. And if you're not regular, so it's a problem for me. I was only going once every 2 or 3 days. And so the first thing I had to get on was basically like an intestinal kind of supportive, kind of supplement to make me regular. Because if I wasn't regular, then all the detoxing I was doing was actually just grabbing it, putting it into my system, and then it wasn't going anywhere. And then it was like floating around, and I was getting more exposed. And so it's a big thing.
So Linda says, what if you never sweat? And I have to tell you kind of a funny story, but not really. I would go into my son's school and teach group fitness classes. And I'll never forget this one little girl. I'm teaching this whole gymnasium of middle school kids. And this one girl just stopped. And I went, are you okay? She goes, I'm hot. Like, she didn't understand the concept of sweating, but worse than that is maybe she couldn't. And that's a good indication that something is wrong. I know some adults that can't sweat because, their toxic load level is probably so high. They've got to get like skin brushing and detoxing, drinking lots of water, doing the binders like Dr. Jess talked about. I mean, we could talk forever in a day about all of the things that you need to do. But I want to ask you one more question before we go, and I want to find out what you're up to. So many of us who have accepted this mission of educating the public about toxic mold and mold illness have had sort of a spiritual awakening. And I wonder, Brian, has that happened to you?
I don't know if I would classify it as like a spiritual awakening. I think it kind of went back to what I talked to at the beginning. I felt like I didn't really have, like, my purpose wasn't being filled. I think there's so many ways to classify like spiritual and how that affects different people. I think for me, I felt that there was something more that I should be doing. I just didn't really know what it was. And then when this whole path kind of started for me, it kind of opened the door for that. When I saw it work for me and I saw the impact that it had, I was like, oh my gosh, this is how you actually help people. And then I started realizing how big of an epidemic it was, and that it's not some small problem in LA where I lived. It's literally everywhere all over the world. I work with people on 5 different continents trying to deal with this stuff. And it's insane. And so I do think, and I mean, whatever, spiritual awakening, finding my purpose, whatever it might be, I do feel like that has happened for me, and the fulfillment that I have. Like, I wake up every day, I love what I do, I'm happy to work, I'm happy to talk to people, and I'll tell you this, and I don't know if you've experienced through all the kind of sharing your story and everything that you've done. I've had people tell me that I've saved their lives,
Yeah.
multiple people, and I don't know what's better than that. Like, when someone tells you saved their life. And I have one in particular, he literally sends me a Christmas gift every year. It's been 7 years now. And he's always thanking me in every, thank you for saving my life. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for, I mean, it's just amazing, the impact you can have.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Spiritual awakening can be in many different forms. That kind of feel good feeling about, wow, I'm helping people. I think that's, one of the things that has inspired me. Again, talking about mold is not really the things that I wanted to, check off on my bucket list of things to do
Right.
before I die. I want to talk about mold. But every day I get I'll tell you, I have helped some A-list celebrities who have, because of my husband, who have heard about our story and contacted him. And I've been in touch with them and helped them walk through it, because it can be daunting. So I thank you, Brian, for doing what you're doing. You're enlightening a lot of people. You're helping a lot of people. How can people find out more about you and follow you on social media?
Yeah. So my Instagram account, easy to get into me. It's at Mold Finders. We share stuff all the time. I really try to do all I can to provide as much free information as we can to empower folks. So between that and my podcast, which is called Mold Finders Radio, those are 2 areas. So much information we just kind of give to try to help guide people. If you're looking to kind of take the next step and figure out, like, how do we have Brian help us? How do you work with us? That sort of thing. So we inspect as a national inspection company. We travel the country with hubs in different places in the country. We work with people that are very hypersensitive dealing with mold issues. And so we travel and do in-person assessments, figure out where the factories are, how it's moving, the whole thing that we talked about. We actually give them the remediation plans that they can execute. The other thing that we've recently come out with, we're trying to figure out, I can only do so many inspections a day, right? I could do 1 a day. I could only do so many a month. And so,
And you got to be careful, because you can get sick too.
I am from it. My body thinks that I live in a moldy building because I've been in everyone's houses for
even though you take all the precautions, right?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It gets through. It's, gets in my car. It gets, there's just so much.
Your hair.
So the other thing that we did, because again, I can only do so many, right? So if I was working every day of the year, there's 365 people I could help, and that's it. And for me, that's not enough. And so we had this initiative that we wanted to figure out how to reach more people. So we created a training webinar and then a supplement kind of do-it-yourself home inspection program, where I literally break out every room that I go into, what I look for in those rooms, where I look for them, to teach people how to look in their own homes. It's called Mold Finders Method. Price point is so much less than having to fly us out, right? So if that doesn't work for you, then there's an opening for you to get in there. And it's really all about empowering people to take control of their own space and be their best advocate and understand how to find these things. Because like you said, if I live in the sticks, like, who do I have?
Yeah.
Well, now you have my entire brain downloaded into a system that you can use. You could go through your own house. You don't even need to worry about those guys anymore.
I love that. I love that. Tell us once again what that website is.
So that's moldfindersmethod.com. I do a webinar once every couple of weeks. Right now, we're setting up the next one. So the enrollment isn't set up yet. I'll probably push it up today, later. and you could roll and kind of get into that webinar, see what it's all about. And I do a free teaching in that webinar for everybody. So that's
awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, Brian. And thank you for sharing your gifts, because it is a gift to be able to help other people like that and help them get to the root cause of their illnesses. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. And thank you for sharing your platform and your time with me. It's so nice to be able to help people, and anything else I could ever do for you, please feel free to reach out and ask. I'd be more than happy to do anything.
I'm gonna call you on that, because I want you to be in my documentary and write something for my book.
I would be happy to do both. That's amazing. Yeah, of course.
Okay.
I'd love to do that. Yeah.
All right. I got the disclaimer right here on video now.
It's happening.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. Please share this, because you never know who could be going through this and is afraid to say something. It's not a pretty topic. It's not a glamorous topic, but you never know what symptoms and illnesses could be caused by a water leak, could be caused by having mold, where you don't even see it. So please share this. Thanks again, Brian, for joining me, and everybody have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.